Welcome to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, brought to you by Pilma. This podcast helps lead lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Here is your legal marketing expert and host, Ken Hardison.
Well, hello, everyone. This is Ken Hardison, and welcome to another episode of Grow Your Law Firm. And today we have the pleasure of having Tom Lenfestey from Raleigh, North Carolina, who is a practicing lawyer, estates and other types of practices he's going to tell us about. But Tom is also a serial entrepreneur, and he owns a company. One of his many other interests is the Law Firm Exchange. And the reason I wanted him on our show today is because we're all about growing law firms. And one of the quickest ways to grow your law firm is to buy another law firm. And most lawyers don't think of it that way. But if you look at people like Google, Amazon, all the big corporations, their massive growth is not just inside, they're acquiring other companies. And that's how they take over the market. And that's what you could do. And it's not as hard as it used to be. And I think Tom's going to tell us a little bit about that. So thank you, Tom, because I think you can add some valuable information to our listeners today. And I'm really interested in this too, because, you know, I've sold 2 law firms in my life. You know, I think anybody that builds anything, business, you should have in mind what's your exit strategy, whatever it might be. You know, you got to have one, I think, sometime. It might not be in the, 20 years from now, but you need to have one. So tell us a little bit more about yourself, because I just skimmed over it. And your background and your company, Law Firm Exchange.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate you having me on, Ken, and appreciate, again, kind of the resource you've been. Again, Tom Lenfestey, attorney CPA. My background in law was estate, corporate, and tax. I tell everybody back, around 2011, 2012, I was doing a lot of succession, tax business planning for mostly professional businesses. So dental, CPA, some insurance, some medical. And I think I just got jealous of the fact that they seemed to have figured out what their exit strategy options were and how the process worked. And so that entrepreneur side of me that you mentioned, stopped and kind of really thought how this could work for law or who was doing it already. There's this guy, Ken Hardison, that had sold his practice. But otherwise, it was, really looking as, the marketplace needed to be built, right? It needed to be more actively promoted. So since about 2013, that's what we've been doing. The Law Practice Exchange really focuses on building the marketplace for buying and selling law firms. And we do that through knowledge and process, right? To be kind of that accountability and be that knowledge source, through those different steps. So whether you're buying a law firm that you're already employed in and you're just kind of buying out the senior partner, or you're looking in the marketplace, to sell your firm or buy your firm, we're there to help you through it.
So you're kind of like a one-stop shop. You can sit there and handle the whole deal and then do all the legal work too, right?
Well, we don't do the legal, but I know lots of good attorneys, to send them to or whatever else. So yeah, it's purely the Law Practice Exchange, purely brokerage, consulting, non-legal services. We'll put it that way.
So, all right.
As I tell everybody, I'm an attorney CPA, just not your attorney or CPA, right?
I guess that keeps you out of conflicts, right?
That's right. Disclaim, right?
Yeah, I understand that now. So, here's the big deal. I think, it's buying a law firm. So I think the biggest question, I let you get this question every time you talk to somebody. How do you evaluate the fair market value of a practice? It's like a lot of businesses, it's the multiples of EBITDA, EBITDA, and your CPA. I'll let you explain that.
Sure.
But that's, and then the deal, and then I got some other questions, but I think that's the big deal. And I don't know that there's any right question or right answer or wrong answer, but I'm interested in what your answer is, because I think it's all over the place.
Yeah, it is. And it, greatly depends on, your firm structure, location, practice type, how you've built it, everything else. But what I tell everybody is the starting place is first and foremost, accept that your law firm has value. whether you're a, $50 million a year firm or you're a, couple $100,000 a year firm, it has value. The goal is to really figure out what that number is and then figure out how to transfer that value to somebody else. So in breaking that down, the concept of value for law firms, I really separate into two components. One component is how much value does the owner attorney or owner attorneys, right? The ownership group have, and then how much does the firm have? So kind of that's what makes up the total value that we can potentially transfer over. So a firm that has its own real strong, good entity-wide marketing plan probably has more value, than the personal ownership may, right? If the firm has great systems, process, implementation items built, that firm value builds. But a lot of solo, small firms, traditional firms have a lot of that personal attorney, value.
Right.
Our goal is really to look at how can we lump those together and focus on transferable value. So what of those two components, personal and firm value, can be transferred to another buyer? And the way we approach it, Ken, is we actually take 4 different methods. So one method is revenues. We look at how much historically the firm has done in revenues. We figure out from a, transfer transitional plan, are you going to retire? Is it a disability situation? Is there a big client that's not going to continue, with somebody else? Those different things, how much revenue that you've done would be projected forward that would be continued to be brought in. That's where that firm marketing plan, things that aren't personally tied to you as much at risk, come in to be a great value driver. The second method we use is an earnings method, which you kind of referred to as EBITDA, which is earnings before income taxes, depreciation, and amortization. The simplest term to explain that is how much do you as the owner take out of the firm? How much do you make as being the owner? Not doing the legal work, that's your salary, but actually of owning the firm. So, if your firm does $1 million a year and you pay yourself a, fair salary of an experienced attorney of, a couple $100,000, but then you get an extra, $200,000 in owner's profits, benefits, those type of things, we'll add those owner's profits, benefits all together and then take a multiple of those to determine, potential fair market value. So again, on revenues, we're looking at how much revenues will carry forward. On earnings, we're looking at what is the benefit of being an owner of this firm, and will that transfer to another, buyer, successor, otherwise. So, if you're an associate in a firm and you can take over, what that senior partner that's owned the firm to that date has basically taken out of it, you should do the same. As long as the relationships, the revenue, and otherwise keep coming in, the earnings should be there for you to pick up. And so we look to that for really value of what would be paid in purchase price or otherwise. The other 2 components that we're going to look at is market comparables. It's a young marketplace. It's a confidential marketplace. So where we can get them through our own deals or through others, we try to look at market comparisons. So if there's, this personal injury firm, here, and there's one a state over, what is the market in certain practices, certain regions or otherwise to do that. And then the 4th component is really to look at asset value. Asset value, the easiest way to explain it would be, if you were just going to shut down the firm and kind of wind it down over time, what would be the value? For most firms, most practice areas, that's not a real substantial value. They've got some cash in the bank. They've got, some furniture, fixture, equipment that probably nobody will buy. But I will tell you, in certain firms, personal injury, workers' comp, immigration even, there's case inventory. And case inventory becomes a key asset when we look at that. So certain practice areas have a higher, what we'd say, asset value than others, right? Because you already have certain things already in the door on the shelf. Yeah. Those 4 methods, we take them and we apply them based on multiples, but we also apply them based on, what really the firm is. So, for a personal injury, that asset approach may be weighted a little bit higher than, say, a, one-off litigation firm, right?
Right. I know. I took this course one time, trying to, the whole deal was about buying and selling businesses. And the big deal they were talking about is, and actually there's something out there somewhere. I don't know. I think you have to pay for it, but it tells you what multiples for different industries. But if I remember correctly, I couldn't find anything for law firms that was, but like certain software companies are like 12, 15 multiples, whereas a grocery store might be 3 multiples, 3 times the beta or whatever, however you say that. But that's interesting. That's very interesting. And I think here's the deal: the biggest thing they need to take from that is you need to have systems, great marketing systems in place, and great infrastructure systems, because that's going to make it more valuable. And let me ask you this, because this is something maybe non-lawyers, but I've seen companies buy a company and shut it down just to get their mailing list.
Yeah.
I would think that the list, if you're sending stuff to the list, even if it's a PI firm, the fact that you are staying top of mind and that firm's name's up there, that would be valuable. But I don't know. Does it make any difference with law firms?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're closing a deal out in California right now on actually an estate planning practice where the buyer has picked up other estate planning practices, and their big goal is not to worry about, the attorney transitioning, the seller, or anything else. They just want the list.
Yeah.
And they're going to, do as much as they can with that list. Pre-COVID, they would do kind of the, they would have a big open house, kind of merger announcement party, whatever else. But they really just want the list, and then they pay, for, the value of the firm, based on the value that's generated from that list, right? But yeah, absolutely. I think with everything, there is the next generation that really, the buyers that feel they can do more than potentially the sellers have done, or they don't need the organization and structure that the seller has had. So they just need, potentially the clients and that list you speak of.
So here's the big deal, and I saw, and maybe this is changing, and I want you to give me, I pray and hope that it's changing, but how do you get the financing? Because historically banks will not loan money on stuff like this because, well, I say that, but because of they can't go to the courthouse and auction off your caseload. There's not a lot of ask, like you said, a bunch of old used furniture is not going to bring a lot. I don't know, but I got a follow-up question, but I'll let you answer that one first, because
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of the things starting out that I knew would be an item we'd have to check off, right? How to bring financing to the deals. We talked to a lot of traditional, lenders, your local banks, everything else, even those that, deal in and really like having lawyers as banking clients or customers. But what I found is SBA lenders.
that's what I thought.
Are the way to go. We have great relationships with SBA lenders, especially one, close to you up there in Wilmington. Live Oak Bank is one of our key relationships that we just think does a great job. We have some other ones. So SBA, definitely, they will lend. They need to know the law firm and get, law firm lending platform, like the structure. And that's what we've worked with these SBA lenders to really educate and kind of work through it on that. Because then they get comfortable, right? And a lot of lawyers do on real estate, of the practices they're selling, and lenders love that. And SBA can do a lot of creative things with that. I mean, normally under an SBA, you're getting a 10-year loan term, but when you bring in real estate, depending on the structure, you can even stretch it even farther, which really helps the cash flows, right? But if it's not SBA, really you're looking at, there's, equity funding that will, act as lenders, everything else, similar to what you guys see with, funding of, mass tort, firms, or PI, marketing growth or anything else. There's, private equity money out there that will lend. A lot of them will do it non-recourse. You're paying a little bit higher interest, on that, but more flexible terms. And then the other component really is, not to say traditional banks won't do it, but the other component is, seller financing, which we can talk on, later. but usually seller financing is going to have some component, in the deal as well.
Yeah. And yeah, I would think it. I know we had a mastermind member at Pillman that bought a firm, and that's how he got it. He got SBA. That's what I wanted to ask you was what had been your experience with SBA, and that was the first thing you spouted out. So that made me feel good because I was talking to him. I said, "Try SBA." I said, "I don't know." I said, "I really don't know, but try it." I said, but yeah, I think you're right though. But the problem with seller financing, as we know, is that you can sell something to somebody and run it to the ground and you got nothing left. And that's always a fear, I think. Don't you think that's one of the seller's biggest fears if they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, there is a place in, all of our deals for, what we'd call performance-based payout, right? Meaning earnout or seller financing. And that's just depends on, what the firm is. A firm that really operates around the selling attorney, they receive all the referrals. It's their personal brand. That's really the value.
Yeah.
There's a lot of risk in making sure that transfers and transitions over. There's ways to mitigate it in any deal. But, to your point, Ken, I think, yeah, it is a concern. Seller financing or earnout, performance-based structure. What if the buyer doesn't do a great job? What if they run it into the ground? And so we work through things. One is, finding the right buyer, right? To try to mitigate that. I mean, give yourself as much timeline and as many options as possible. And that includes even if you're, have a successor, buyer within your firm. We really encourage everybody. I mean, we're retained a lot of times to help with that, but we'll still encourage firms to explore the marketplace just to consider, other buyer potentials.
Yeah.
Because the best fit, the one that you feel is going to do the best management, marketing, client service, everything else. And then the other aspects are making sure you set minimums, you have, the right security via promissory note or collateral or anything else, all the legal fund that can come with it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I sold 2 law firms. The first one was the big one, and then I had a small Social Security practice down here in Myrtle Beach, and I sold it. And the first one I sold to one of my partners, and that was easy. And I knew he could handle it, and wasn't worried about it. Second one I sold to a lawyer. I had some recommendations, but I really didn't know them that well. But I had everything set up full time. I had process and procedures, marketing systems. I had everything laid out. I mean, it was like, basically a blind man could come in and run that firm. And they paid attention to nothing. And I took it back over in like 120 days because I had some deals in there that if certain things, were not done, certain KPIs were not met, that I could come back in and take it over. And I did. And then I sold it again. And that time I got cash. But I sold it for less than I did the first time. I'm gonna be honest with you because it's harder. I think you get more when you finance. I mean, I do. I might be wrong, but I think you do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for a buyer to take full risk and deposit cash at closing, right? They're probably going to discount that amount that you're going to receive.
Yeah.
We really try to find, the best blended approaches. We'd love, mutual commitment to the deal, which means, seller has skin in the game and buyer does as well. So maybe buyer went out and got an SBA loan for, 50, 60, 70% of the deal, but seller's still got a portion. That's much like how equity groups, work their deals. They want seller to stay active and involved to make it happen, right? And not all firms need that, right? I mean, some firms are amazing and they've done everything probably, they've listened to you guys, Ken, over there. And I mean, they've set up systems, they set up process, and the buyer's ready to tackle it and go, right? But, that's the big thing I'd say, definitely negotiate your terms, do your due diligence, but give yourself options. And time and just exploring all options of who that buyer could be is kind of the best route. You had a backup plan, which was good, right?
Yeah. Let me ask you this. As like me, a lot of baby boomers are hitting that in the 60s, early 70s. Are you seeing a lot more firms being available now? Or do you think it's probably much of prime time now to buy a firm? Or?
Yeah, we actually, attorneys overall, retire later if they retire at all, right? So
That's
the, the normal age of the baby boomer, retiree maybe doesn't apply to lawyers as much. But what I will tell you is, yes, I mean, we've definitely seen more of that, the 60, 70-year-olds who are looking for retirement. The other thing we've seen, Ken, is we've actually seen a big, increase buyer and seller side since COVID. And so, part of that, I think, on the buyer side is looking for,
deals.
growth through acquisition deals, diversity of practice areas. Our first practice that flew off the shelf, in spring was a bankruptcy practice, right?
Makes
And,
sense.
everybody was focused on, recession, we're going down. And, on the seller side, that was pretty quiet until late summer, fall. And then that's really picked up, which is always the anticipation, end of the year, beginning of the year, type of time frame. But I think now, those, senior attorneys have had enough, right? They don't typically need it for the financial piece of it. And I think they've got to a point that even if they want to continue to practice law for a little while, they've realized they don't need to own the firm and deal with all the management headaches, especially even navigating it through a pandemic and, all the virtual and kind of changes and everything that came with it. So yeah, we've seen an increase. We believe that will continue.
You said something while there. A lot of lawyers die in their chairs. They really do. But this is something that I'm seeing. We got one of our mastermind members, and they're doing this, Tom. They're going out and finding law firms where the people, they don't really want to quit practicing law. They just don't want the headaches of having to deal with running the management and dealing with having to worry about expenses. They just want to practice a little law and slow down a little bit. Are you seeing any of that going on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a key element to going to an attorney that usually it's not the practice of law. I mean, they may want to take, longer vacations, everything else, but most attorneys don't want to go from, 100 miles an hour to zero.
Yeah.
Right. And most attorneys are known in their communities, otherwise, as attorneys. And so for them to go retired and have to give up that label and everything else. So the opportunity to kind of stay on, whether that's of counsel or anything else, is something that we structure all the time and is a great opportunity for, buyers and firms who are looking to add, brand, talent, clients, list, to their, kind of fold. Because a lot of these attorneys, they're willing to come over. They just don't want to deal with all that hassle, as you mentioned, right, of managing and having that fully on their shoulders. And the nicest part is it creates a disaster plan for them, right? I always say, like, they can then, practice without fear. I mean, because they're part of maybe a bigger organization or team, but they don't have the, ownership responsibility, the management. If something happens and they're, 82 years old, still practicing law, but they don't own the firm and they're only working on select cases with other team members, it's probably not as big of a deal as compared to if they were 82 years old running a solo owned firm, with 3 paralegals and still trying to do 5-6 days a week practice.
Right. So how do you actually go out and seek people to try to get them to sell their practice or to buy practice, or do they just come to you?
Yeah, we're always in search mode. So, when people used to actually meet in large groups and those different things, I'd go out and, do talks to different groups and different bar associations. We've got great relationships with, state bars, bar association, lawyer insurance companies who are all concerned about, attorneys practicing too long, right? And attorneys having a continuation plan.
Right.
And, giving opportunities to the next generation of firms. So did a lot of that. So we're always in search mode, but a lot of them, do come to us.
Yeah.
It's still a fairly young marketplace, and we'll tag ourselves as the leader in that marketplace across the country. So, if somebody's looking for that, usually they'll find us.
Yeah. So here's something that I think, and I want to know your opinion on it. I actually did a podcast on this a couple of weeks ago with the non-ownership of law firm looks like it's coming our way. It looks like it's already there in Arizona, Utah, other states are looking at it. I mean, how is that going to affect everything? I mean, or do you think it's going to affect it at all?
Oh, I think it's going to greatly change it, right? I mean, if I was trying to predict, when I started the Law Practice Exchange in 2013, I don't even know if I thought it would be this quick that we would have non-attorney, ownership. I was on a call, with a client and an ethics attorney about a year ago, and the client asked, "When do you see non-attorney ownership coming?" And the ethics attorney's response was, "Not in my lifetime." And they weren't that old, and I think they're probably surprised. But yeah, Arizona, Utah, California is looking at it, and I think probably 12, 13 or more states.
Yeah.
And those that aren't even promoting it are secretly discussing and committee and everything else. It'll probably have to come from the Supreme Court like it has in Arizona, Utah to make those changes, but it will happen. And I think it'll take us to a place very similar to foreign jurisdictions, like in Europe, the UK, Australia.
Yeah.
Big firms are probably worried about the CPA firms because they're already practicing law in those jurisdictions. I mean, we've had, on immigration practices, we've had attorneys, in Canada that practice essentially US immigration law, for Canadian businesses, right? Because they're US licensed attorneys, but they work for a CPA firm. And, Canada allows it, right? And so it's already happening. It'll just kind of open that up. But for, other lawyers, non, big law, anything else, I think it's one of those that, to this point, we've only been able to self-fund or go out and put everything on the line to borrow money to grow our firm. And I think in opening it up to, private investment and those opportunities for the right firms, it's going to be tremendous. And, for the marketplace of buying or selling, I mean, we feel pretty strong that it's going to help add a lot of business, minded, buyers to the game, right? And they'll pair with hopefully business minded attorneys. And so capital meets, good management, good knowledge, good legal services, and hopefully they can do good things. And, hopefully that helps as well, focused on really what is value within the law firm legal industry.
Yeah. There was all these Finkelstein and there was some other lawyers, Jacoby Myers and whatever, that filed lawsuits in New York and some other states, and they all got kicked out for, and I think that's why that ethics lawyer probably thought that, because everything got shut down in courts. But then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you got Utah and Arizona. I was actually speaking at one of their ethics, the Utah bar, about a year ago, and it was going on. I mean, it was rumbling. I mean, they were dealing with it then. I mean, and then I said, I kind of asked them what was going on, and they saw it coming, and then Arizona beat them to the punch, I guess. But I did a lot of research on that. Australia and England, I mean, it never had as big effect as everybody thought it was going to have. I mean, like only 17, 18% of the law firms were non-ownership law owned by non-lawyers. And I think you're right. It's going to be the big firms that's going to be worried. And I think the PI firms, and there'll be some, I mean, like the Jacoby Myers, people that are already set up, they know how to scale, and if they just had more capital, they could just become a behemoth. Just really get big. Is what I think. I don't think, but I like what you said, and it's a different angle. Maybe not people getting bought up, but maybe getting invested in for a percentage of the company, and that way the lawyers are still there and still got maybe even majority interest, but the firms that are running them right, it's got the processes, procedures, got really smart marketing, good ROIs, run like a business. They're going to be the targets for these non-owners. People would, like you talking about equity money, that want to come in there and invest because they, if you can go into a business that you can get a 35, 40% return on that's pretty good, and I know a lot of PI firms that are doing that.
Yeah, I think absolutely, Ken. And I think, to that point, I tell everybody, I don't know if I have new ideas or anything else, but I'm a student of other, industries and profession. And I think when you look at impact, you can look at dental, you can look at medical, you can look at CPAs, all of the other industries have essentially kind of moved this way, right? The other
Yeah.
professions, excuse me. But, if you look at, dental, for example, you've got two things. I mean, you're in South Carolina and, they're allowed basically corporate owned dentistry and, but you still go in and see the dentist, right?
Right.
It's the same practice. You still have the same professional care. It's just the ownership. And typically the dentist doesn't have to worry about as much of the management, but they still have incentive and tie-in. And there's dentists on the higher up level, right? As well, and more corporate and kind of, regional and other things. And so I don't, it'll change some, but it won't change, everything. And
Yeah.
a lot of firms will stay independent and kind of do that. So I think it's a lot of risk, but I think it'll take time to really see how things will, come together, but it opens doors. And I think that's actually a good thing because it'll help lawyers evolve and change because it is changing. The consumer's changing, the industry's changing. So I don't think it'll be a bad thing to be able to compete with some of the other, non-law firms that are all, private money backed and have tons of dollars to do it. So I think, putting lawyers and opening those gateways for them to fight back a bit, right? But under the law firm model would be good.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I welcome it. So here's the big deal. Somebody interested. I mean, how? Couple of questions before I ask how to get up with you. But so I know the big burning question in the back of every lawyer's mind is, well, how much do they charge? How do they charge? Do I have to pay if I'm buying a firm, or how does this work? Is this like a real estate deal that the seller pays all the fees and because I'm putting up the money to buy, or how does that work?
Yeah, we work on a success fee, right? So similar to our, personal injury, other attorneys for contingency fees, and we're paid by the seller. And so, for buyers out there or anything else, we have great relationships, but, our goal is, you hire us to find the right buyer, the right deal for your firm. And if you like the deal and approve the deal and the deal closes, that's when we earn our fee and kind of carry it forward from there. So, that puts us in a position that I like because we are working with them. The other part is typically we earn with our sellers. So under the component of, if we've got a percentage fee, but they're getting paid over time through seller financing or earnout, so are we, right? So the nicety of that is, we're not taking all their cash up front based on our, fee or anything else. We're really just, fully invested in making sure they are going to see that payment. So if it's not a good buyer, we're not going to try to sell our client on it because if they're not going to be successful and make those payments over time, then we wouldn't get paid either.
Yeah. Do you ever have law firms come to you and say, I really want to buy up, like I see bankruptcy the next 18 months. I want to try to buy 3 or 4 bankruptcy firms within in North Carolina or in Georgia or whatever. Has that ever happened?
Yeah, it definitely has. We've had certain ones like employment, other ones based on, kind of niche practice areas. A lot of that we'd probably work as well, kind of crosses over a little bit into the legal recruiter space, right? Kind of that element. So we'd either pair with them to kind of make sure we can do that or otherwise, because, finding retirees, if we know kind of the practice locations otherwise, and if they're not in our database, we're happy to go out and search, but that's a lot of what those legal recruiters are, knocking on doors, kind of doing that. Finding the age of the attorney, right? And finding if they want to actually, stop practicing law is a little bit of a challenge. We like to look at bar numbers and see, what number they are, in the list, but overall it's just kind of a balance of that.
I'm a low number. I'm 10 354.
Right. So we'd like you, Ken, right?
Yeah.
We'd come knocking and say, hey, we see you own this firm or anything else, right?
Yeah.
And have you discussed what your continuity plan is or your exit options, anything like that?
It's funny. I sold out at 52 years of age.
Wonderful, right?
Well, I wanted to do other stuff,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's the part is once it opens up to, this is an option. It doesn't have to be the option for every attorney to look at selling your practice. But the worst thing in the world is, it's actually more work, in my opinion, to, try to wind down your practice over time and really, go through all those legal, ethical, other responsibilities. So even to shift over what you have, send somebody the client list and take a, purchase price that's determined based on, success, you're kind of shifting the burden onto somebody else, right? And so that's kind of the goal, is just to consider it as an option. Doesn't have to be your only, but, selling might work for you.
Yeah. I never bought a practice, but I did do this. 1984, this guy, he was 87 years old. He practiced to the day he died. And I got to think about it. He'd been around, and he was well known. Everybody called him. And I went to his widow and bought his phone number for $5,000.
Yeah.
And I thought that was, I don't know how I thought about that, but I said, man, they're going to get a lot of calls. And I said, listen, because I didn't want his practice. I just want his phone number,
Absolutely.
But so there's a lot to that too. I mean, getting the phone numbers, the URLs, all that stuff is important, I think.
Yeah, I think, right away, that's where I say every law firm has value, whether it's the phone number, it's the website, it's the past clients that, will call, whether it's, a year from now or anything else. And they say, hey, I've got this new need, right? Or a repeat need or anything else. We've had a lot of our buyers who have taken over deceased attorneys' practices, and they really don't pay anything for it, right? Kind of like, your aspect, which is sad to that attorney that passed away that didn't get value for their practice. But overall, the attorneys deal with the hassle, right? They deal with the angry, past clients that call up and say, who are you, right? But the reward to them is pretty significant, right? Because, what stream of clients comes in, from that phone number or that website or those different channels or funnels.
So if somebody wants to talk to you to find out more about your law firm exchange, how can they get up with you, Tom?
Yeah, thelawpracticeexchange.com. So thelawpracticeexchange.com is our website. Phone number is 919-789-1931. Or you can email me at tom@thelawpracticeexchange.com. And of course, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, any of those different things as well. But yeah, if you look for me or the Law Practice Exchange, you'll find me.
Yeah. Well, I think this has been illuminating, and I think the deal is lawyers always think about growing their practice. You got to spend more money on marketing or do, whatever, but you can't just buy another practice. I mean, you can. I mean, and you've, I think you've enlightened us about how to do that and a lot of different things. So for that, I thank you very much, Tom.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, until next time, this is Ken Hardison, dedicated to your success.
You have been listening to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, the podcast that leads lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Go to growyourlawfirm.com to find more ways to market and manage your law firm. Please leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts.